the end point of capitalism, the end point, the peak of capitalism, is the Epstein class. That's it. I'm so sick of all these liberal disclaimers and these leftist disclaimers, not just liberal, but at least leftist disclaimers. People who support Iran, but every time they have to start with, it doesn't mean I support the regime.
America's role as an interventionist has been consistently against this form of human liberation and democracy and women's rights or whatever. They don't care. When they struck, it was Iran the first time, I think, or maybe it was Yemen. It was Yemen the first time. And everyone got like a glimpse into like, this is what world leaders sound like. They're sending like eagle emojis to each other and like fists and like that's the level of diplomacy. And I think that's not like particularly unique to American. Maybe it's like American happens to have an insanely stupid administration right now. But like that's kind of how the world works. The deal is falling apart. You said you were going to come help us, and Iran is like, just watch how good your friends in America really are. Which everyone else in the Middle East, in the whole world really, has learned that lesson already from Osama bin Laden onward of like, you think the Americans are your friends? Just wait until you really need them to show up, and they won't.
There was a story about the U.S. taking THAAD interceptors away from South Korea, which themselves provoked a diplomatic spat with China. And now they're like, oh, you had to pay a price with China, but by the way, we're just going to take those back because we need them to protect Israel.
I'm firmly of the opinion that the Germans have learned nothing, and that they don't have that guilt complex that they're always saying. If that was the case, if they had a guilt complex, they would not beat up Jews that are against the genocide.
But there are historical, social reasons for this high proportionality of Jews in the Epstein files. But there are also theological reasons that I think we also have to talk about. And we have to have these conversations carefully and responsibly, but ignoring it is a disaster. Ignoring it is going to be putting everyone in peril.
Okay, good day, everyone. We are here again with Jay Shapiro. And we invited you again, or we actually, all of us said, hey, let's have a chat again already for a while to talk about the things that are going on today. There are so many things: the Epstein files, Iran, the whole debacle that's going on right now with Israel, the genocide, of course. So first, before we start and do a deep dive into all these things, welcome back, Jay. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's good to be back. I think last time I spoke to you, I was in Madrid, but I've since moved to Berlin. So I have a new home location, which is an interesting place to be. It was for friends and family and work stuff with my wife. But yeah, that changes the dynamic a little bit with conversations about free speech and being a little closer to the empire. So we can discuss that as well. But otherwise, I'm good. The world is absolutely madness, of course, and so trying to just find some sense in the noise and some calm. I'm sure, like everyone else out there. But yeah, crazy times.
Yeah, Peter.
So you're in Berlin. I'm just laughing because there was a recent episode of Radio War Nerd where Mark Ames was kind of, I don't know, laughing at or just expressing absolute befuddlement of the situation in Germany regarding Jewish people who are against the genocide. He was like, you know, these Germans are just on another level. Like they especially hate Jewish people that are against the Israeli government because they're like, we have the moral authority. We committed the Holocaust, so we know what's going on. You Jew, you are anti-Semite.
It's very strange. It's very
dying.
Strange. Yeah.
Like, it's the most insane thing. I can hardly believe it, but I've heard that from another friend of mine like 2 years ago who lives in Berlin. And he said basically a very similar thing 2 years ago. Is that who can possibly say like that? Please explain.
Yeah, well, I could give you a little insight. I mean, I'm still new here, so take it with a a big grain. But I'm not the first to notice that Germans and Berliners, they love rules and they love following rules. As someone who spent 15 years in New York and has this kind of attitude, they'll stand at a red light and not cross it on the smallest street in the middle of the night and just wait for that thing to turn green. And it's like, it's something everyone notices here as a newcomer. There's a thing about rules and obedience here. I mean, I think as we get into these conversations, you start to, I'm in a place with an incredibly dark shadow of history here in Germany and Berlin. And you're just constantly reminded, at least I am, that the current conversation and psychology and ethos of nations is so much defined by the shadow of their history, including Iran and Germany, everywhere else. And I don't know how, we in the West tend to think of Nazism and the Nazi phenomena as, and how we sort of take it. But weirdly, it has this dual place in the mind of Germans, that it started as a very disobedient sort of revolt, right? It was disobedience and not following the rules, even though we tend to think of it as this insanely obedient and conformist kind of cult that arrived. And it did become that. So I think they are deathly afraid of disobedience here, and they love rules and they love order. And so I've witnessed a lot of that is it's a strange psychology. It's a strange mentality where I think they are weirdly obedient to their government because they view their Nazi past as a disobedient child that got out of hand. So I mean, that's just what I've witnessed so far. But yeah, I don't know. I can't give you much more insight than that. Yeah,
I think the Germans. I think the Germans in that sense are just very similar to the Japanese, in that they are very organized. In some way, shape, or form, you could say a collectivist people as well. Different than, for example, the Dutch, even though we're neighbors of the Germans. In that sense, we're very different. But I would say, when you talk about the Germans can't stand Jews who are against what's happening in Palestine, I would say there is an equal contender, and that's Muslims. Like the Germans, the Germans are, I would say, equally good as the Dutch, blaming anti-Semitism on the Muslim world. So they will say, even politicians will say that anti-Semitism was imported from the Muslim world into Europe. Okay, so we have our mainstream politicians saying that. First, I thought this is too ridiculous to even take seriously, but then it became normalized, and now I see it's even happening in Germany and in Britain, and it's become a thing, and it's just it's this deep-rooted European cultural Islamophobia is something you see, especially in the I wanted to say the northern, originally Protestant colonial countries like the Netherlands and the UK. But on the other hand, the French are also very terrible in that sense. And only the Spanish somehow are a bit milder when it comes to that stuff. But one more thing about Germany is that I was planning to soon have a chat again with Dimitri Lascaris, brother Dimitri, about a case. You should try and see if you can find it. I currently don't remember the name of a German guy, of Turkish descent, but born in Germany, guys. Born in Germany. This is a German guy who has been sanctioned by
yes, I know this.
Yeah,
case.
by the EU, I think, or by Germany, or by the EU. He has been sanctioned. He cannot travel. He cannot use his bank account. And now here it comes. People are not allowed to give him gifts because that is contributing to terrorism or something. So he said, I can literally not eat if I listen to the rules. Yeah. And why? Because he had a channel like you and me talking about what's happening in Palestine. I kid you not.
Yeah. And he was also talking about Ukraine. Honestly, in Germany and the EU, the bigger third rail is Russia and anti-EU
Ukraine,
kind of sentiment.
You're right. Ukraine.
Yeah. And that's really That's the thing you can't. When I talk about the obedience, there is a reverence for the EU that is quite strong here. They think this is the thing that keeps them safe. That is the lessons that they've learned from 2 world wars. That they built this structure, and they, in a Hobbesian sense, they have to be a part of it and obey it and be obedient to it. And this is the thing that keeps them safe from their own shadow. I think they're obviously mistaken about that, but that is, that's the real third rail here, even more so than Palestine, to be honest.
Hold on one second. I just want to ask a clarification question because I'm not terribly informed about European ignorance. Kareem, are you serious that there are people who earnestly argue that anti-Semitism comes not from Europe but from the Muslim world? Like seriously, like they actually believe that?
Well, yes, I can. It's too baffling for words, but it sounds very funny. But when you live in a society like that, and I remember when I still lived in the Netherlands, and it was daily stuff on the television about Muslims and Islam, and I always say it's a local obsession. But anti-Semitism, indeed, while anti-Semitism is a European invention, where actually the Muslim world took in quite a lot of Jews.
Yes, Iran especially, which is
Iran.
Which should be broadcast very loudly right now. Yeah.
And then we have far-right politicians, and eventually it spread, of course, to liberal politicians and mainstream politicians. But it was Muslims imported anti-Semitism, hatred for Jews into Europe with mass migration and that kind of stuff. And it started out as some marginalized far-right politicians saying that,
so
but
anti-Semitism,
it's become completely normalized. It's become culture to think.
Hold on,
this is like Geert Wilders kind of stuff. Yeah.
After the war, because that's when the significant immigration of Muslim people to Europe began. So then anti-Semitism wouldn't have existed in Europe until after the war. Make that make sense. Like, how do these people think that?
Well, that's the problem. That's what smart people do. They refute these claims with facts. But you know how it goes with all these with racism. Racism is motivated. Racism is motivated by emotion. They don't care about facts. So you can come with graphs and numbers, and you can show facts in history books, and they will just say you're woke or you're a cuddling immigrant because you don't want to hear the truth. That's just what they say. End of discussion. And that's the way it goes, because racism is so convenient, man. You can just say to everybody who tries to refute something, oh, you're just woke and you're cuddling immigrants, and then you can go back to your racism, because it's just so convenient to stay in that racist mindset, because you can blame everything onto someone else, even anti-Semitism. It's really disgusting.
Wow.
Yeah. I wish I could show you guys maybe I can find some videos of our politicians saying that stuff, because it happens a lot, and maybe some English subtitles underneath or something. It's really, really, really ridiculous.
Peter, they really just think they solved the problem and they're over it. They think they learned the lessons from World War II. I mean, my German friends who I meet here, we get into these discussions. They start learning about Nazism and their crimes at like kindergarten, and it doesn't. There's my one friend, a girlfriend of my one friend, I think she said literally every single year there's an entire sort of like semester dedicated to a different aspect of, and they get tired of it. They have fatigue of it, but it really works. It seeps into them of like, we learned from this. We've really repented. We're good with this now. Oh, and now the anti-Semites are the Arabs. It's like, it's really quite convenient to just sort of wipe away history. They feel like they've paid their price, and by doing so, by having this reverence for Israel and supporting it, and but we can get into that, all of that stuff.
Well,
I'm sure
we can actually stay in that. I would say, Jay and Peter, I'm firmly of the opinion that the Germans have learned nothing, and that they don't have that guilt complex that they are always saying. If that was the case, if they had a guilt complex, they would not beat up Jews that are against the genocide. It's just the whole, even the Second World War is being turned into a, how do you say that in English, a stick to beat people with that you don't like, and often in a similar form of racism as what eventually led to the Second World War. So, for example, in the Netherlands, we had, at least when I was still living there, we had this. Every year we have Remembrance Day, okay, for the Second World War, and Liberation Day, and that day has become a moment where the far right, okay, tries to block Moroccan and Muslim speakers, on the Remembrance Day. So we had this like poet or something, or a writer, author. He was of Moroccan descent. And then you had far-right politicians protesting against that. Why a Moroccan Muslim, and anti-Semitism is a Muslim problem. This is an insult to the victims of the Second World War. And they won. I mean, so the Remembrance Day of the result of exclusion becomes a tool of exclusion in Europe.
Yeah. I mean, I think just sort of psychologically, they do. I would defend a guilt complex. I do see that here, and that word still fits for me. But the way that they want to, or they demand, they expunge and deal with that guilt is on their terms, which is on the terms of, we support Israel, we've learned from it. And so anybody who challenges them of like, no, that's not truly learning from the mistake or whatever. You haven't really changed your ways. They are, viciously attacked as you're seeing. So I do think there is a guilt, or maybe so a fear of what they've done here, but they're going to deal with it on their terms. It's like it's like you're in a relationship with, you're going to marriage counselors, but you just don't like it because they're not giving you the answer that you want as a man or something. So then you just go to like 20 until someone tells you what you want to hear and tells you that your wife is wrong. It's almost like they're just not going to accept kind of the true lessons of World War II. They're going to deal with their guilt on their terms. And this is the way they do it. And I mean, we see the result of it. It's very oppressive in that way.
It's too bad they can't share like that, the excess of that with Japan, which if anything seems to do the opposite extreme of not going anywhere near far enough to apologize for their government's atrocities in World War II. But
Right.
I'm also curious. You've been there for, I don't know how long you've been there in Berlin, but I'm curious to see what you think the reaction to the new war of aggression launched on Iran is. I mean, I've seen, of course, like European governments' official statements, most of them absolute garbage, other than maybe Spain's. But I would imagine that the majority of the people have a different view, but I have no idea. I'm just guessing on that. So what is your impression? Have you seen any polling on that?
I mean, I haven't. I think it would be disingenuous. I've been here officially living for 3 months. I was temporary before that. So I probably shouldn't speak like on behalf of what I'm seeing in Germany. But I will say just anecdotally, it's like quieter on the streets than when I lived in Madrid, as far as like running into protests and stuff like that. It's a much more subdued population. I think, like I said, I think there's a reverence here, particularly for the EU, and they do just sort of follow what Ursula and Merz to a degree. So they're not popular people, but there's just not a lot of like active revolt on this kind of stuff. I mean, the truth, listen, I'm sure we can get into Iran now. Germany is completely screwed energy wise, and everyone kind of knows this and has done this. Of like, they abandoned their nuclear energy program sort of willingly in order to become dependent, as it were, on Russian gas. And when that ended, as Putin sort of pulled the plug on that measure, and I think obviously we can talk about America and the West's complicity in that whole system. Germany has no idea, has no plan. Europe doesn't really have a plan here, and so I think it's no secret that they all need Iran. They all need Middle Eastern oil. They're all desperately seeking how to fix this or fill the energy gap. All of these countries, and so. Yeah, they're all going to be completely subservient to this aggression in Iran because the Strait of Hormuz needs to be open for them. It's like sometimes people overthink these things. It's just not that complicated. That these countries are in desperate measures economically and energy wise, and they're going to support it. And I think they're from the people like you're asking. I don't know how much revolt there is. I think I would just be making stuff up if I told you that people they're certainly not out on the streets protesting. I'll tell you that much. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways of looking at the national interest there, though. I mean, if they don't want oil prices to spike, it would probably behoove them to oppose the war. But when Daddy tells you you've got to do one thing, then it seems like all of these leaders just fall in line, and it seems like their fear, in my view, highly irrational fear of Russian tanks rolling through Lisbon, next week is a big driver of that servility. I mean, even Mark Carney, of all people, like his initial statement was, oh yeah, Iran, very bad, blah, blah, blah. It's like, hello, we all remember you just 3 weeks ago when you gave that speech where you said that, the liberal international order was a fiction. We all knew it was bullshit, but when it benefited us, we went along with it, but we're no longer benefiting from it. But then, just a few days ago, he's right back to let's pretend like this fiction is real and we condemn Iran. So it's like, what the fuck is going on here?
I think that what the fuck is going on here is the title for everyone's podcast right now, basically. Yeah.
So, and just to jump in on what you just said about Germany and the whole gas thing, the energy thing. I mean, Germany, Europe in general, by the way, but Germany especially is just giving itself self-blow after self-blow. I mean, it started with the whole Nord Stream pipeline debacle, and now they're just following blindly into, well, and then, of course, the blind support for Israel. Now I heard the blind support for the U.S. invasion or U.S. Israeli attack on Iran. So it's a like I said, okay, maybe they have some guilt, as you said, Jay. But I think Germany has learned nothing of their past.
Of course.
Especially because you've been there for 3 months. I can assure you, I grew up in that part of the world, right next to Germany. You're going, even though you're an American, you are going to be, I think, taken aback by the nasty racism that you will start seeing in Europe. And Germans are good at that stuff, man.
Yeah, it's the good one, the real classic version. And my wife is not white, so she gets it even stronger. So I have to be careful. Yeah.
And where's she from, if I may ask?
Well, she's from Chicago, but ethnically, her mother was born in Pakistan and her father was born in India. So she's from like the historically the Hyderabad sort of Mughal Empire India. So not Hindu India, but Muslim India from ages ago. But she was born in Chicago. But yeah, not a white woman. So she's. I have to remind myself to be particularly sensitive to it, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. So prepare yourselves in that sense, I would say. And that doesn't mean that Germans are bad people. Don't get me wrong. I think Germans, there's a very large segment of really, really warm and open-minded people. In fact, I always said, if I had to choose between Germans and the Dutch, my own people, I prefer the Germans, to be very honest. But culturally, you could say collectively, there is a serious racism problem in Germany and in most European societies.
Yeah.
Well, just keeping on the energy issue, Trump just announced what I would call Operation Energy Futures, which is his claim that the U.S. Is going to offer insurance for oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz and a naval escort. Now, that hasn't really made much of a dent on in oil markets, I think, because people who actually know the situation are laughing this off and saying this is completely infeasible. that you're not going to be able to offer any sort of significant protection. So this is kind of dead on arrival. But I don't know is there any sort of belief in Germany that you've spotted that, daddy is going to sort this all out, so we don't need to worry, and this doesn't presage a really dark economic future for us because we are part of the U.S. empire?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I can't quite speak on like what I'm seeing in Germany. I probably consume, 90% non-German news. I'm not a German speaker fluent yet, so like I'm probably out of my depth there. But I mean, I'll just say from my take, it's, everyone's been saying this, and we're not military analysts, but this seems like the dumbest fucking thing that Trump and the Americans have ever done, from like every angle, even just the cynical, like he's trying to win some game of Monopoly and get all the chips. Like every angle of this is so fucking stupid. I think he's just a really pretty stupid person, and he's in desperate measures. Who knows what's in the Epstein files, if that's part of it. I think it is part of it. He's it's that simple sometimes. People talking in his ear. Yeah, people like Pete Hegseth. Like we tend to, I think our that our leaders have this, information we don't have, and they think differently than us or whatever. Like, no, these are just fucking idiots. Like that moment in this madness of the last couple of years when the reporter, I forget his name, he's some Atlantic guy, was accidentally put in that signal chat between JD Vance or whatever. When they struck, it was Iran the first time, I think, or maybe it was Yemen. It was Yemen the first time. And everyone got like a glimpse into like, this is what world leaders sound like. They're sending like eagle emojis to each other and like fists and like that's the level of diplomacy. And I think that's not like particularly unique to American. Maybe it's like American happens to have an insanely stupid administration right now, but like that's kind of how the world works. Is like they're idiots trying to figure out how to send emojis to each other and win a game of Monopoly that they think they're playing, or Risk or something. And even from that angle, this was so fucking stupid that he did this. And we should of course talk about Israel dragging him into it, or however that sort of works, or is there blackmail or whatever, because I don't know if he thought he could just win this easily in a couple of days. Like I just had Radhika Desai on there, and that was her sort of take, being like he was convinced it would be like Venezuela and he would get this like, cool image, headline. Like he said he watched that on TV and it was like a movie. Like he thinks he's a fucking in a 90s movie. And it's not. Like Iran it's not Venezuela and knows what it's doing. And Jesus, like as cynical as it is, Iran's response to be like, guess what, all you Arab states, we're going to send missiles your way because you've been playing this game and working with the Americans, and everyone knows the kind of post World War II deal that was made that Iran opted out of, which was basically, everyone knows it, right? America was like, we'll take care of all your security, and in exchange, you don't have to build up your military, so you can concentrate elsewhere. You can have a monarchy. We won't really give you much shit about the religion stuff and like the human rights stuff. You can do what you want in your country. We'll take care of all your security for you. Just give us a cheap deal on the oil and keep the shipping lanes open, and we're good, right? And basically, one by one, Qatar, UAE, all these places fell in line with some revolts over the time and some little suppression, but like they all fell in line. And except for Iran, famously, as we know, out with the revolution, it was the one that got away. The Shah was playing that game, we all know, as the U.S. puppet, but Iran's the one that got away, and it was a big one. It was like, dang, they have a lot of oil, and they have access to this really important shipping line. And it's always been the one that America and Israel and the imperialists wanted to get back into the fray. And so now that shit's hit the fan, when it's like it's just not going to negotiate with us the way that we want, even though everyone's reported like clearly it was willing to do a lot of this negotiations. Well, we're just going to try to bomb it and force, I don't know, the Shah's son or this idiot to come back and charge or whatever. And Iran is like, okay, cool. Hey, guess what, Arab states? This was a fake negotiation that the U.S. was doing with us. We were willing to talk to them, and it was a ruse, and they bombed us anyway. We're going to show you how good of a friend the U.S. is when you get in bed with them. Here's a bunch of fucking missiles your direction. And now we see it. They're all running out of the interceptors, right? Like, and yeah, like, let's not be, I'm being cynical here. I'm just like talking in a game of Risk. I'm not talking morally here. But even just in that game theory analysis, they're really smart at it because now everyone's seeing Qatar and everyone's running out of these interceptors. Well, those aren't their interceptors. That's them being like, hey, America, you said you would take care of security. That was the deal. And we're running out of interceptors. Come help us. That was the deal. And obviously people are fleeing and everyone's talking about who's going to go on vacation to Dubai anymore, who's going to buy. And that's real. And they're like, holy shit, the deal is falling apart. You said you were going to come help us. And Iran is like, just watch how good your friends in America really are, which everyone else in the Middle East, in the whole world really, has learned that lesson already from Osama bin Laden onward of like, you think the Americans are your friends? Just wait until you really need them to show up, and they won't. And then we'll see what happens next. And Iran is like that play they're making of being like, of course they're going after Israel as best they can, but that play I think surprised everyone. And it doesn't seem America was ready for that. And now what are they going to do? America's going to go broke trying to defend Qatar or the UAE. How's that going to play with the America First Trumpers? Like, they're already pissed at you. I don't know if you saw Nick Fuentes' crash out on Trump. Like, this stuff really matters. Like, this, from every angle, this is the dumbest fucking thing that Trump could have possibly done if his only concern was higher approval ratings, staying in power, helping Americans, whatever else. The only rationale for it is basically he's panicking because he's being blackmailed, which is totally possible. Whatever 13-year-olds are in that Epstein file, I don't know if this is going to keep it out.
Or younger.
Obviously, people
or
are
younger.
Or younger. I have, it could be, awful shit. People have guessed, well, maybe this now will lead to a troops on the ground war, and he'll try to cancel the midterm elections or something. I mean, the clock is really ticking on that dude. The Democrats are going to win the midterms. And they'll probably impeach him. They'll try to force the Epstein files open. Like, it's really desperate times for Donald Trump and the MAGA people. But this move he made is just so colossally stupid, let alone immoral and deadly. And, we could talk about, this sounds like I'm talking like very about a chessboard here, but I'm not going to forget these are dead girls at a school. Like, this is insane shit. But just on a pure strategic level, holy shit, he is stupid. And this is so insanely stupid. And Iran has played a pretty big card. And now the cards are not in America's court right now. It's in Qatar, Dubai, UAE, Saudi Arabia, all the Abraham Accord countries, we could call them that. It's in their hands now. Because it's like, well, you've seen how good your American friends are. Are they going to show up? If they don't show up with more interceptors in the next couple of days, those missiles are going to start hitting hotels. They're going to, and hey, we're firing them at you. And where is that anger going to be channeled? If you're Dubai or the UAE, is it going to be channeled at Iran, the guy who fired a missile at you? Sure, a little bit. I think a lot of it is channeled at the Americans because they always knew this was a risk. UAE and all these countries, they always knew that this was a risk, at least after the Shah was ousted. I guess historically, maybe they thought Iran will also play the game. And we're all just going to play this American game. But when the revolution happened and you had a different power there, they always knew this was a risk. And so what are they going to do? Are they like, if I'm Iran, I tell like Qatar, I'll be like, pull out of the Abraham Accords and I'll stop the missiles. Like, it could go that way. Like, who knows the next direction? But boy, like Iran has won already is my point.
I just wrote an article about it on our Substack. I can advise you to read it.
You've been writing great stuff. I'm on your email list. It's great. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. So have you read the latest one where I talk about the Gulf states?
No, There's been a lot going on.
I would like to hear I would like to see what you think about my argument. I'm better at writing it down than to express it under words. But personally, I think even now that the United States is just not defending the Gulf states because the Gulf states are just slaves. They're just house slaves. And I think that even then, I don't believe the Gulf states would ever turn on the Western Empire and Israel because we're talking about the Epstein class here. Their whole legitimacy to live a life of depravity and opulence is rooted in the Western Empire, their protection by the whole Epstein syndicate, you could say. And if they would align with any other power like Iran or China or whatever, it creates a completely different dynamic and also expectation among the people. And so it's morally, you can almost say it's morally, culturally, ethically impossible for these depraved pedocracies to align themselves with a society like Iran that is actually has these kind of moral and religious values very high, and revolutionary thought very high. Then to even, they're getting bombed, they're not protected, whatever, but these guys like MBS and stuff, they're so addicted to their palaces and their little harems of little girls that I think that they would rather see their whole country burn as long as they still have their palaces and their harems. You know what I mean?
No, you're absolutely right, but that's the play here, and Iran can display that for the whole world. If that's the next step of this, it's they're outnumbered. The thing about always creating an elite class in a society and counting on them to play the game and take care of whatever propaganda you need to keep the population generally subdued is they're always outnumbered. So it's almost like it's this funny game where America's like calling on the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow their government. Well, Iran is almost asking the same kind of thing in the places you just mentioned, being like, you see the people that your elite leaders have got in bed with and got in jail with. Yeah. And, the religiosity is complicated because of the Shia Sunni, like who's listening to who there. People have pointed out in Bahrain, of course, there's a huge Sunni population, Shia population, which was somewhat spiritually loyal to the Ayatollah who's rising up. And but yeah, you're dead on. I'm not expecting those countries to like fold and suddenly, I don't know, change course. They're quite addicted to building these buildings. And did you call it the pedocracy? I quite like that. I think I know what you're getting at there. that says enough. That needs to be said. Yeah.
I have to give credit here to what's his name again? Of the East is a podcast. Nima, I forgot his name. He was a guest. Remember, he called it pedocracies. Of East is a podcast. Come on, Sina is his name. Sorry, my apologies if you're watching. Sometimes I'm really bad with names, but he actually called it pedocracies, and I was like, "That's such a good name, man." So I copied it from
that's
him.
Where we're at. Yeah.
And he calls Westerners Westoids. That's also a good one.
Good. Well, I don't have too much to add there. So
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of this is going to depend on just what Iran's missile stockpiles are. And that's something that no commentator on YouTube or any other place has any real idea of. And so, just as an annoyance, I can't stand the Monday morning quarterbacking like, oh, Iran should have done this and should have done that. It's like, bitch, you don't know what the fuck their capacities were. So just sit this one out, shut the fuck up. And, you can talk about other things, but when people are like, oh, Iran should hit them harder. It's like, what are you talking about? You're not a general. You have no idea what capability they have. Just, But so far, that all being said, this is all of the reasons why for the past, since, what was it, 2006, when George W. Bush, that administration was talking about waging a war of aggression on Iran. All of the reasons why that made no sense whatsoever, like all of the negative effects that would provoke. We're seeing all of that right now. I mean, even just last week when I was talking in class to my students, I was like, there are a lot of good reasons why you might think that Trump will attack. The potential blackmail, the fact that his brain is pudding, he's like Biden too, and all of his advisors are pushing him toward war. There's a very strong case to be made that he will launch a war. But on the other hand, there are all of these rational reasons why it would make no sense whatsoever from the massive disruption to all of the Gulf state allies, to the lack of interceptors for both Israel and the U.S. and all of their allies, and pissing off their allies by taking away, like there was a story about the U.S. taking THAAD interceptors away from South Korea, which themselves provoked a diplomatic spat with China. And now they're like, oh, you had to pay a price with China, but by the way, we're just going to take those back because we need them to protect Israel. So, I mean, and we haven't even talked about, all of the negative consequences, but as of now, it's really just kind of mind-blowing to see it. Unless the Trump administration is able to get a ceasefire, or Iran just simply does not have enough missile stockpiles, then it really seems like they're going to have to get a ceasefire one way or another, because the damage to just the U.S. empire economically, and I'm including its allies in that, just seems far too much to bear. I mean, we're talking about Taco Trump. He pussies out every time the markets dip, and so far he's been lucky with the market reaction. But this goes on for another week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I mean, I don't know.
I think we may assign a little bit too much power to Donald Trump in this sense. I think Donald Trump is just a decoy. I think the bigger powers behind him are the ones who are pushing him, such as, of course, Netanyahu in Israel, and probably other big billionaire players and corporations that we often just don't hear about, because I don't believe that guy who hardly reads, Donald Trump, is very much the organizer of all the stuff that is happening right now. And you know what I think personally, what Iran is doing, and that relates a bit to what both of you also said. I think that Iran came to the conclusion that both Israel and the U.S. can take a lot of hits and recover and deal with that. I mean, we got to be honest. Israel has taken a lot of. It's been, even though it's committing the one of the worst genocide in modern history. It just keeps going, man. I mean, the population is still going. There's no uprising. There's it's a war. It's a war people. It's a war economy. It's a war-like people, and they thrive on it. You can see it. So I think the Iranians made the probably the correct decision. Okay, the U.S. and Israel themselves can take a lot of hits, and they have probably already calculated that into their actions. But if Iran was probably thinking, if we are attacking the things that hurt Europe and that hurt the vassal states, their oil, our supermarket prices, gas, you name it, then the pain is going to spread. And when the pain spreads, that's going to be pressure onto the United States and onto Israel. And I think that is part of the calculation. What do you guys think?
No, totally agree. Yeah, that's what I was saying of going after all of their friends and buddies and assets in the whole region. They're, like I said, there's only so much you could do hitting Israel directly. But no, it's smart. It's really, I think it was a surprise response, and it's we don't, like Peter was saying, we don't know. We're not military generals. We don't know. There's a lot of posturing about how much we have. Everyone says, oh, we still have more to come. And who knows? This is all just total madness, and all seems completely, from a really broad, zoomed out perspective, a predictable story of whatever stage of, Radica was calling it senile stage of capitalism that we're at, where it's just kind of on autopilot trying to survive, and it can't. It just needs to. It needs continuous, endless war. Hopefully, people have had enough of it. It does seem. I do think, like, where my mind is at is I'm really trying to keep a close eye on the trajectory of the right in America, because that fracture is legit, is real. For probably many of us have seen Tucker's continued whatever. Mental track that he's on, which has been fascinating, and it's like it's really he's doing a useful service doing this so publicly, to be honest. Even though I think he's like deep down,
and Candace Owens in her way as
Candace
well.
Owens, Absolutely. I mean, and you could see, and I like these people, even though like you see where their brain hits the wall of racism, and they can't, like, you see all the times where they go too far, and but I like and appreciate and respect this like openness that they're doing this with. His conversation with Mike Huckabee was fascinating. To a degree, people like Nick Fuentes, this kid who just, you should watch the clip of him just, saying, fuck JD Vance, fuck Rubio, fuck this, he's out, vote for Democrats. I mean, it's pretty wild. And you remember, and he says he was 18 years old when he voted for Trump in 2016. He's basically a child. And I give these kids some leeway of some mental growth here. But what I just sort of to zoom back from the conversation, but Iran is the break. Like, we're done. I think Trump is done. This is the end of whatever MAGA was, and I think him personally is done. Like, I won't make bold predictions on your show, but I don't know if he's going to finish the term, because this is like, if the Democrats take over, they're going to impeach him. This is obviously a violation of his war powers. I mean, so many things you can get him on. Maybe the Epstein files comes out. Like, he is done, and I don't think his base is solidified enough to come help him. Yeah, he's never going to dip below 25% or whatever, even on a bad day. There's just a certain amount of psychology that people are will worship the king as it goes down. But I think he's done, and I think he's over. And so what I worry about, like, is we've seen this trajectory. Let's just like zoom back to October 7th, or even like COVID, and if you really zoom back, like 9/11, like the conversation of the world since 9/11, we're still in it. A historian would obviously compress this to, we're still in the post 9/11 conversation somewhere like America. The America First ethos, which people should remember. If people think that's new, right? It's not. There was an America First committee before World War I, which was Lindbergh, and it dissolved the moment that Pearl Harbor happened, which is fascinating. And that's where you get a lot of the conspiracy theories of false flag or whatever, in order to dissolve it. Like, literally dissolved like the next day. Gerald Ford was a part of it, and then he becomes a huge war guy. But America First as this isolationist, we don't get involved in foreign entanglements. They always go back to George Washington, like with his initial sort of warnings. And this idea of just ending foreign wars, and Trump being the anti-George W. Bush and all that kind of stuff. That is great that they have that kind of feeling. And I'm always talking about sort of, people bring up the horseshoe theory of the right and the left, but there's massive differences in the right and the left that matter, even though we can sometimes kind of sound the same when we rail against foreign wars and foreign entanglement. And it's really, I think, coming to a head now with something like, we're on this channel, I assume all fairly lefty, furious about American interventionism and whatever, but we think the motivation for that, I'm not sure what the right wing thinks the motivation for that is. If they think it's just, we didn't sign up to be the policemen of the world, why do I give a shit about the freedom of Iranians? It has nothing to do with me, right? They say that kind of stuff, which is like, it's a really weird, ironic thing that's happening, where you almost get, on the Fox News side of the coin here, these like moral arguments, which is strange. You don't expect them from the right, of like, the Ayatollah was a bad guy. This is about women's rights. Like, we're going there to liberate the people of Iran or Iraq. Like, you brought up the predictions of these people. Dick Cheney saying we're going to be greeted as liberators. If people want to see a really interesting piece of video, just Google or YouTube 1994 Dick Cheney C-SPAN interview on why we shouldn't take out Saddam, which he perfectly predicts in this clip exactly what will happen, why you shouldn't go to Baghdad and take out Saddam. And then he did it exactly. Anyway, sort of beside the point. But on the right wing, you're hearing these moral arguments that Saddam was a bad guy, Gaddafi was a bad guy. These guys are butchers, right? Like, it's about the freedom of girls in Iran, let alone we just fucking massacred an entire school of them. But whatever, leave that alone.
Epstein.
But you hear
Epstein, the whole Epstein case.
Yeah, that was a break for a lot. Marjorie Taylor Greene got off the train when that happened. Good for her. Tom Massey, a few other people. But so you hear these moral arguments for American interventionism on Fox, and those people are starting to get, the MAGA movement was supposed to not care about that shit anymore, right? They're like, we don't care about what's happening in Iran over there. or Iraq or whatever. It has nothing to do with me in America. I'm worried about my kitchen table and I'm worried about my job, and take care of me for once. Take care of me here. By the way, take care of white people too, before everyone else. There's always this tinge of sort of white racism in it. But that's sort of weirdly why they think that we go to war in foreign countries, I suppose. And they were tired of it. Whereas sort of like for you and I on the left, we understand the motivation is not to go liberate Iran, right? If you really, Iran's the perfect example, which now I'm happy more and more young people are discovering the history of 1953 and Mossadegh and whatever, because it's the perfect experiment. You're like, if you think American interventionism is about spreading democracy and liberating people, and you really wish that Iran had a secular democracy because you think that's an ethical, good form of government and it'll liberate people, well, they had it with Mossadegh. And who overthrew it? The West overthrew it in favor of a monarchy that was a puppet of the U.S. and
that was an Epstein that was an Epstein empire. I mean that's what the West wants everywhere. I mean, I'm not even kidding you guys. Every puppet that the West installs, whether it's Syria, whether it's Egypt, whether it's back in the day in Iran, who was overthrown, it's always depraved Epstein figures, and people overthrow these guys. And now you have the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they're not bothering me. So I'm like, let them have their own government and their own style if that works. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm also so tired talking about all these moral arguments, Jay.
Totally.
And I have a question for you. What do you think about that? Because I share that frustration. I heard somebody say yesterday in an interview that he said, I'm so sick of all these liberal disclaimers and these leftist disclaimers, not just liberal, but at least leftist disclaimers. People who support Iran, but every time they have to start with, it doesn't mean I support the regime. Right. It doesn't mean I'm in support of this style of governing. It doesn't mean that I am in support of the Ayatollah. However, the Iranian people should not be attacked. And I'm like, I totally agree with it. I can't handle it, these disclaimers. First of all, stop coming from that moral position when you come from a society that is in no way better. You know, if you talk about women's rights in Iran, okay, let's talk about black rights in the United States. Let's talk about the prison population in the United States. 25% of the global prison population is imprisoned in the United States. Mostly black people, Mexicans, and indigenous people. We can talk about any right that we want to talk about, you know? And I'm not going to say that there are no women's rights issues in Iran or in any country or in the Netherlands or in Germany or black people rights or indigenous rights. Yes, every country in the world has serious human rights abuses. Every single country. So if we are talking about foreign policies and where our societies, our Western governments or regimes, I should say, are intervening in other societies, we're not gonna use disclaimers to how can you say, to distance ourselves from their political system. We are not in the place to do that, in my opinion. I find it distasteful.
Yeah. No, I hear you as sort of a strategic thing. I mean, I might be guilty of giving some of those disclaimers at sometimes, but it's mostly, I think, trying to announce to people a bit of confusion. I hear you. I hear you strategically. You're fed up with it, and I totally get it, and I'm fed up with it too. I guess I would say, as far as sort of like the women's rights things goes, it's absolutely true, your point, and I would just put it in the terms of sort of the patriarchy, which I brought up in my last show, and I want to talk about it much more, because anyone on this show should just go ask if they have a wife or a girlfriend or women in their lives what it's like being a woman growing up in Western patriarchy. It's no fucking cakewalk here, and that's something that just needs to be. And now, like you said with the Epstein class, it's almost like the West, in some of these eyes, lost all moral standing when they pulled off a genocide in Gaza and didn't give a shit. Everyone's like, who are you going to lecture us about sort of human rights or how to engage in wars? And then the Epstein thing was like, are you really going to lecture us about how to treat our women when you do Epstein Island? I mean, it's all the moral sort of standing is gone. So I hear your anger there, but I guess I do have to say, listen, like my card's on the table. I'm an anarchist. This is like back to sort of like the difference of the left and the right. Just to like close that loop, because I think it relates, is if you and I, it's totally on your point, because as leftists, we're like, well, we're against interventionism, maybe not as an idea. We could talk about that sort of like abstractly in a philosophy 101 class. I think it's interesting, but we're certainly against Western American intervention or Israeli intervention, not based on at least for me, not based on some blanket principle against all intervention. We could talk about like Star Trek's Prime Directive as a great example from like the sci-fi world here. It's really interesting. But we're against the American-Israeli intervention because American and Israeli intervention, let's talk about American history here, is not interested in the liberation of it's all bullshit. Like that's why the Iran one is a perfect example. Or I always go, like post-World War II Africa is a great place to start. If you have this, if people can't get over some of the stuff you just said about sort of the religiosity of the Middle East, and they don't quite understand it, and they think, yeah, but don't they force women to cover their hair? And I have a problem with that, which they don't. People should just go like Google some video of Tehran. It's like they're not. It's not like morality police beating women on the street every day. It's obviously a lot of Western propaganda, although there are problems, right? But if you have a problem with that, go to post World War II Africa and pick a country that was interested in their liberation, and see what America and CIA involvement was there, and who is pulling the plug on this so-called liberation.
Also a good example.
Afghanistan, yeah, I'm trying to pick like a non-Muslim one for the people who might have problems, but I'm with you totally. It's all the same story. America's role as an interventionist has been consistently against this form of human liberation and democracy and women's rights or whatever. They don't care. As long as you give them cheap shit, really cheap shit, they don't fucking care what you do. And if you stop giving them cheap shit, because God forbid you want to nationalize the oil or something and sell it on a market, well, we got to come kill you. There is nothing to do with spreading democracy and liberation and women's rights and all this nothing. So to answer that, like hopefully that makes sense. It's like I don't have, in principle, in some abstract sense, a problem with intervention. It's like I put this on sort of like a personal level of like if I have a neighbor who I think is getting abused by her husband, like I hear it at night over, I hear her getting hit and I hear her screaming or something, and I feel, oh, this is kind of bad. Should I intervene? Should I not intervene? Obviously, the questions that pops up in people's minds is like, I wish I could intervene and stop that. Could I call the cops? Could I do something? But we're always having to do this calculus of like, will I do more harm than good? And then frankly, and this is the sicker part, what's my intention? If my intention is like, oh, I'm actually in love with her and I want to like get rid of that guy and I want to abuse her and take her over, well, that would be a huge problem. And that's kind of the analogy I'm putting here of like America being like, you want to go intervene and help these abused women in Afghanistan or Iran. Do you really, or do you just want to become their new exploiter? And maybe it'll be a little better. Like here's like as a total gift, and you're not going to like this, Kareem, because it is apologetics to a degree. There's people like Masa, I forget her last name, the one with the crazy hair, the Iranian. She's been all over CNN this week. I used to be sort of connected to her in these like Sam Harris worlds, actually. And she's like, this is great. She's like celebrating. She's like, this is like the fall of the Berlin Wall, just pure excitement. And I got to tell you, like, I have empathy for that position as a woman in Iran who has been harassed by the Republic many times and all this kind of stuff and had to flee, who has made a huge deal out of this idea of just being able to show your hair and get this law off the books or whatever. Like, I do not doubt, because I don't think religion is great. I do not doubt that on an individual level, like a snapshot of life under the Shah for someone, even a woman, and life under the Ayatollah for a woman might have gotten worse, and maybe significantly worse for some individuals who just lived that life. And who am I to tell them like, no, you just don't understand. It's really bad in both regards. The only thing, and this is sort of the like,
but at the same time, these are the people. I don't know this woman, but all these commentators from the West. At the same time, they celebrate the death of their own people.
Yeah. No, I know. It's but
so you care about women's rights in your own country, but you don't care that a school is bombed.
she would call it collateral damage, I'm sure. Yeah, listen, I agree. Like, there's problems with all of these arguments. I'm just trying to go in the abstract, like, philosophy sense here. If that were true, so actually, as an anecdote, after October 7th, when this all kind of was really going off in my mind, and I just kind of decided to jump into the YouTube conversation publicly a little more because, as I've said many times, the people around me, who you all know, just were failing miserably. One of the people who I got on her show is a woman named Yasmin Mohammed, who we used to be sort of friends and close. And she has a really, really awful personal story of abuse. And she was in Canada, and it sounds like her mom was kind of insane and had a bad divorce, but ended up putting her in a full, like, the burqa with the gloves and the whole thing. And she was forced to marry this guy who I think was, like, really involved in Al Qaeda. Anyway, terrible personal story with her engagement with Islam, and developed, understandably, a huge distaste for Islam, and sort of went on this anti-Islam crusade after she escaped some of that world. She's actually Palestinian. So it was very interesting. And, she has a channel, and sort of fell into the Sam Harris argumentation of that the left is propping our refusal to critique her enemies of Islamic religious fundamentalists who have enslaved her is like a huge abandonment of liberal values, and what are we doing? And so she developed this huge anger. We all know that. I think we all know that Sam Harris style argumentation. She's one of them. Anyway, she invited me on her show because I was like, when Israel and Gaza was going on, I was like, you're just making a mess. And we can talk. I don't need to say what I said on the show, but I remember we did like a live call with like a lot of her audience, and there was a couple Iranian women in the call, and they asked me some questions at the end that I was waiting for, which were these kind of challenges, being like, because I was making this case of like, I hear you, Yaz, and I hear a lot of women in that call, of this argument that, like, we just need religious fundamentalism out of our lives because we just need that. So, like, I don't care who gets it out, Israel, America, whatever. And I was like, I hear that argument, but just consider my take that I too would like to see the liberation of women. And I too think that fundamentalism of any kind, of any religious, we can talk about Jewish fundamentalism later in this call, but fundamentalism of any kind, including Islamic, is probably not great for anyone, including women. I'm not a fan. Okay. So if I wish to see a world where that is no longer a huge operative force in the women's lives who are on this call, well, my argument is largely, especially in Iran, that revolution and that problem was a reactionary result and a sort of resistance, revolutionary result, as you used the word earlier, Kareem, to American imperialism and Zionism in particular in their neighborhood as an outpost of American imperialism. And so the domino that needs to fall to get to the world where that is no longer an operative force in Iran or Afghanistan or everywhere else, the first domino, in my analysis, is Zionism. So, like, I'm on their side. I'm on your side. We want to get to that same world one day. But Zionism is the thing that needs to fall. If you're begging for Zionism to come in and save you from the Ayatollah, like, it's not going to work, and it's a disaster. So it's almost...
But it's also, if I could shortly jump in, Jay, sorry, but I'm so frustrated sometimes by some of these arguments from these people, because they're so morally inconsistent. That bothers me tremendously, because we have the same types in the Netherlands. We had somebody called Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and she was a Dutch politician, and she was a very famous Dutch politician. And eventually she was kicked out of the country by her own far-right party, because she joined that far-right party to hate on Muslims. And she was doing the same thing with Geert Wilders about Islam, and they're so bad for women and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm like, and then at the same time, you support governments and people like Donald Trump, who are not religious at all, but one of the worst treaters of women and girls you can imagine, and you think that's gonna save you from bad treatment of women? It's such a moral inconsistency that frustrates me, because you're not gonna tell me you care about women's rights by becoming a rabid right-wing fascist. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Just think of this. They're asking the grab 'em by the pussy guy to save women. Like that's where we're at. Anyway, I've interviewed Ayan a couple times. She's now, but I don't know if you followed her trajectory. She's converted to Christianity and become a full-on Christian, which you need to keep an eye, which I think is an interesting personal trajectory, because I'm going to hold out some charity for her that maybe she bumped into some of these inconsistencies and maybe has found refuge in something like Christianity, because she's full on. If you YouTube like Ayan Hersili about Israel, it was like 2 years ago. She's like, read the holy book. Christianity, the Bible tells us we have to be in line with Jews, which, by the way, for some other people that I know, like Yasmin, they were devastated by her sort of becoming a religious fundamentalist of the Christian stripe. So yeah, she's had her own trajectory in that. But yeah, just to close that loop, when I presented that argument of like, basically, listen, if you're no fan of Islamism and fundamental sort of theocracies of the Islamic stripe, well, they propped themselves up as a bulwark against U.S. imperialism and Zionism running rampant in their neighborhood and in their societies. And so if you're interested in having them decline, well, then maybe we should think about how they got here in the first place. But it's very convenient for these Westerners just to completely erase any of this history, to not talk about Mossadegh, just to just move along with this crazy idea that these Muslims, as we started this conversation, were just always rabid anti-Semites, and we're just waiting to sort of come out and of the woodwork and do this kind of thing. So, I don't know if I convinced any of these women, but they should keep it in mind, as we don't know how this will unfold in Iran. But if there is some sort of boots on the ground, ridiculous kind of ground war, regime change, I don't expect that to happen. I just don't think even Trump has the appetite for that, as Peter brought up the taco syndrome already. But if there is, and you do get a kind of like, I don't know, puppet Hamed Karzai, whoever the hell they put in to, like, it's just not going to happen. But if they did, like, you're going to have Syria, Iraq, Al-Qaeda times a million there. And then maybe 10 years from now, those women on that call will come to me being like, I think you maybe had a point. Like, I don't want to see any of that happen. So like, I'm going to try to remain philosophically and morally consistent here, Kareem. I hear your point. I think it's more of a strategic one of like, let's stop just sort of caveating, oh, I'm no fan of the Ayatollah. But I will say, like, yeah, that's not my vision of liberation for women. So I do empathize with women who, or not just women, men, everyone. But I do empathize with people who want him gone or want to see a change happen. But it's just like, guys, how many times do you have to learn that America doesn't give a shit about that vision that you have? They just want your cheap shit on the market at the price that they want to pay, and they want their boats to move freely. Like, that's it. And so they're not your friends here. So they can be your friends today, but as Iran's pointing out to all of their friends or the Gulf states, check back in 5 years who you're fighting against. Because like, and just one more thing to put this in, just because this is important, is like, that school, it's so fucking crazy to me that we're in a place where they bombed a fucking elementary school, and we haven't even like heard any apologies or investigations or anything. Like, how far have we come in just a couple of years? Where even Israel at the beginning, after October 7th, was like, oh, we hit a hospital and now we need like a week of justifications, and obviously it was all bullshit, but at least they felt they had to like be like, oh, we didn't do that, we didn't mean to do that, oh, it was a mistake. Nothing. Like, what the fuck? You bombed a school and like nobody said anything.
And that's
and then, sorry, I know I'm going on for a while, but just really quickly, people have pointed this out. Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker from September 11th, the day after a school was bombed, and I don't remember which one this was, Naftali Bennett was the one who pulled off the thing. That was the day that he was like, fuck this, I'm going to go join Al-Qaeda. And 5-10 years later, I don't even know the timeline, flies the planes into our buildings, and we could talk about all the reasons and other things around 9/11. But I'm not even, this is maybe inflammatory for your show, but I'm not even using the word radicalized anymore. I'm talking motivated. Like, he was motivated by that event, not radicalized, to be like, this is untenable, I'm going to go do something. How many people, parents, friends, cousins, neighbors, just saw their little girl completely fucking obliterated in an elementary school they just dropped her off with, who did the same thing, and that we won't hear about or know their names for 5 to 10 years when it's going to be the classic blowback or whatever. And it's like, what have you just done? So Massa celebrating this as the Berlin Wall moment and cheering on CNN. That's the part that is simultaneously I have moral sympathy for her hatred of Islamic, whatever, republic, but it's just so foolish and it's just such a tragedy. And I'm just as horrified as you are there. So yeah, I'll shut up. I know that was a long rant, but
I
that's
think
where I'm at.
we might even learn something useful from Christianity that, if we want to get a splinter out of our neighbor's eye, it really helps if we take a plank out of our own eye. Just for the dexterity required to get that splinter out of our neighbor's eye. And as a United Statesian, I like nothing more than criticizing other people, other countries, other cultures. Like that's part of my culture is to do that. But I'm left in a very weak position. Like being in China is a great example because it's like, what was my major criticism of Chinese foreign policy? I'd have to go back to the like 50 years ago with the punitive expedition against Vietnam. But, as
Right.
soon as I start saying like, that was a very bad idea, someone would just be like, hold on a second. What country are you from? Oh, the US?
Yeah.
Like, what was your country's foreign policy regarding Vietnam again? Like, 3 to 4
Yeah.
million human beings murdered and
Yeah.
our our punitive expedition killed like, thousands. That's it. So you have no ground to stand on. That's part of it. I mean, I think we would be much better off if we focused on cleaning up our own house first, so that eventually we could come to the stage where we can criticize other people and be able to indulge in that aspect of U.S. culture without any worries and doing so perhaps even effectively if we could point to our own good example. But yeah, I think that you guys covered the main points, which is the most important point, which is, that's not the real motivation. Women's rights was not the motivation for the invasion of Afghanistan. Freeing the Iraqi people from the dictatorship of Hussein was not the motivation. And that matters a whole hell of a lot because the motivation is going to powerfully influence the conduct of the war and the occupation afterwards. So a fundamental point is, I do agree with all of these things, like, living under a dictatorship, terrible. Women's rights in Afghanistan, along with tons of other countries, not good, needs to change. But invading them is obviously not going to accomplish that. So it's all a red herring. It's entirely beside the point because you end up arguing with somebody over something that's completely irrelevant. Like, sure, I wish this, that, the other thing would change, but an invasion is not going to do that. So why are we wasting our time, talking about this? And I guess
not only that, Peter, not only that, it's still, and it's about what you just said, that you see the splinter, what was it? You see the splinter in somebody else's,
splinter in your neighbor's eye.
Yeah, but not the
plank in your own.
Plank in your own, yeah. That still brings me to the fact that that's just pure racism, that we are so easy in our societies to talk about women's rights here and this right there and patriarchy here and there without seeing that same problem in our own societies. So when you talk about women's rights in Iran, but then also say, well, but this is not the way you do it. It still just completely ignores the problem of women's rights and human rights in our societies. It doesn't mean that it's the same. It's different, but it doesn't mean it's less. It's worse or less bad than somewhere else. What I'm trying to say is, it's like you must be really racist and sexist, by the way, to ignore the problems of our society and say countries like Iran or China or whatever have problems with human rights and problems with this and that. Because if your eyes were open to the pain of indigenous people, of black Americans, of the treatment of women in the United States, whether it's the Epstein class, whether it's the porn industry, whether it's the Catholic Church, I don't care what you're gonna choose. If your eyes were open to that, you would be saying that you just said. If you see the splinter in somebody else's eye, but not the plank in your own eye. Like, we really cannot do this. We have the most imperialist, most violent Epstein class running not only our societies but this world. And we've seen the facts for 500 years, guys. We can read it in the history books, from slavery to owning persons, servants, whether it's in Indonesia or Guatemala or Mexico or Brazil or South Africa. We have seen the evidence for 500 years. And the killing and murdering has not stopped. It may even have become worse under the US empire. And we still think we can talk about those rights over there and this and that. And I understand when people say, when Peter, for example, says, this is not the way you bring it. I mean, we are just there not for those reasons. No, but it's even deeper. We have our own literal problems of human rights that we completely ignore. We're so blinded by racism and sexism, but especially racism, that we've never seen that at least as morally reprehensible is the treatment of black Americans in the United States, for example, or indigenous people on reservates. How do you call it? Reservates?
Reservations, yeah.
Reservations, yes. We say reservaat in Dutch, but reservations indeed. So I'm just like, I'm always so frustrated by that. But are you guys so blind? Not you guys, I mean in general. Are you guys so blind to people with a little bit of melanin in their skin that you can make the same bloody arguments for those people as the people you're talking about in another society? Is that complete blindness to abuse in our own society? And it just frustrates me tremendously.
Well, at best, I'll try to steelman the capitalists, because at best they think a capitalist conception of freedom is the be all end all, and that is at best what they think. Because I'm trying to just play devil's advocate here, but if they're like, yeah, all right, listen, my motivation, it's not really the women's in Iran. I want a business deal, and I want to make money, and I think if they opened up their markets, whatever that means, with a different leadership. That maybe held less of a grudge, and we just did business. And we're all just trying to make money. We're all just trying to get rich here. We're all trying to screw each other. Like, that's how capitalism works. And then, the society will change to kind of align with that deeper motivation. And that in some strange way or different way is going to change the situation on the ground for women, when that's kind of the cultural motivation, is screw each other and make money. And I think there's some truth to that, but it's such a hollow, false. You brought up the porn industry, and it's perfect. Listen, I just read Andrea Dworkin's famous book, Pornography, which is a difficult read. That second wave feminism, which is something I want to talk more about on my show, honestly, lately. But it's like, in some ways, it's a more insidious and more difficult kind of patriarchy to notice, because it everything in the capitalist conception of freedom defaults to this thing called agency and free choice and consent, even though your choices and your path within that world are going to be greatly coerced. And so, it's kind of sick also how we use women's bodies and women's situation as the barometer for all of these things when we talk about different cultures, but it is kind of true. We're going to, strip clubs that pop up everywhere over Baghdad when you become capitalist. And is that an improvement for women over, let's say, some draconian laws of male guardianship or whatever? I don't know. None of us on this call are women, but I'm married to one, and she tells me, fuck this. This is pretty fucking oppressive. This assumption of even just wearing makeup, and there's good conversations happening about this now. But in some ways, it used to be derided. I'm thinking of this debate that I always go back to between Steven Pinker, his name I brought up earlier, and Alain de Botton about the world getting better or whatever. And it used to just be called sort of first world problems. Oh, poor you. You have to worry about if you're wearing too much makeup, and if the male gaze at the coffee shop is a little sort of irritating to you. Well, I'm in the third world, and I can't, get water, and men are beating me every time I walk out of the street or something. And it used to kind of be laughed at as this first world problem. But I think that's kind of underlying a lot of the stuff you said, Kareem. You did mention sort of the obvious treatment of blacks in prison and abuses. But the people like the Steven Pinkers will show you charts that say like, well, ours is better and we're at lower levels or whatever. But what's never captured on these charts is what I'm talking about there, of like this, like is the capital, if the best you can offer as the West in some really, really charitable steel man kind of argument is like, well, we're trying to bring capitalism to them and we're going to screw them because that's how capitalism works. But women will get lives better under capitalism. I think a lot of people, especially the younger generation, are starting to see the philosophical problems with that, especially women, of like, is this freedom? Is this the best you could give me? So like, I just think that
look at the whole pornification of all the teenagers with Tinder and everything, and the stuff that it does to their mentality and their mindset.
And it's harder. Yeah, it's harder to see, I think, when you're in it, because it consciously feels like agency and choice, right? No one's forcing them to go on OnlyFans and open these accounts, but they do. So it's like a little harder to see when America's so obsessed with this idea of coercion as freedom. If no one's coercing you or preventing choices from you, then you're free, rather than sort of the other way. But I think underneath a lot of it is those philosophical conceptions of freedom are hollow. And so I'll do the thing you don't want me to do, but in a different way. I'm no fan of the Islamic Republic, but I sympathize with them for looking at philosophically the capitalist philosophical description of freedom and being like, no, that's bullshit. And at least something else.
And also our way of treating women. Let's be honest. Also
Absolutely,
our way of seeing women and treating women as sex objects and all that kind of stuff. And I find that discussion also it's a very difficult discussion. And I've read some really convincing accounts by Chris Hedges about the pornification of society and what that does. And I remember in the beginning when I was still heavily westernized as a young kid and reading Chris Hedges and thinking, oh, old guy and this and that. But now I'm in my 40s and I must say I really understand where he's coming from and where the Iranians are coming from, for example, when they discuss that, like the way you treat women and girls and in pornification of that and dancing in half naked on Tinder, and otherwise they're bullied in school if they don't look good and I'm like, this is also unfreedom. This is also pressure. I mean, when you hear these kids, and also boys, by the way, young boys, this pressure of how you must look in a capitalist society. You must be super good looking, and they're using now testosterone, and they all want to look good. And I'm like, there's something deeply wrong in our societies as well when it comes to these things.
If I could just underline that Pornhub and OnlyFans now purchased by Israelis, which I don't think is an accident in all the stuff that we're talking about, of the way to sort of like continue to promote this hollow. And we could get to maybe the immorality of the Epstein class and this Jewish question I keep asking all my guests. I don't know if you've seen it. Of I don't think it's an accident that they're promoting this version even in that deep level. But just as like because I don't know how old your listeners are, and we're all in our, I don't know, Peter, you look pretty young, but we're all in our 40s here on this call. And I think for
Peter
men,
and me are the same age, but he doesn't have gray hair like me. So
it's just the camera. You both look great. I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, he is gray, by the way. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so we're all men in our 40s in this call, and I bet we have similar kind of trajectories with this. Especially, you brought up pornography, and I think it's a huge issue with it. I was actually, are you recording this? Because someone just buzzed my door, and I feel like I might need to go get it. Can you hold on for like?
Sure,
5 minutes?
I'll edit it out. Yeah, right. So just say what you want, and then maybe also.
Yeah. Then we can. Well, I'll finish. The porn thing is. I don't know if you want to mute yourself. I'm hearing my.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I can do that.
I don't know if it's both of you or Kareem. So the pornography thing, I'm glad you brought it up because. So I was saying, we're in our 40s on this call, and I wonder how old your audience is. And I'm betting we've gone through some similar trajectories and some level of our relationship with something like pornography, and our relationship with something as intimate as sex and sexual performance, and what we find attractive, and vice versa. And so I was, if people are really interested in the heart of the most like strong firebrand feminist, second wave feminist book, Andrea Dworkin's Pornography, I think is quite a confronting book. And she wrote it before internet pornography. But a confronting book that had some, I think, powerful argumentation, really good philosophy about something like the way that pornography as violence towards women constitutes the atmosphere where so much actual violence towards women is normalized and justified and objectified. And it's in some like really basic way. She says, you get, let's just talk about a man masturbating to pornography, which might be subjugating a woman. You get a physiological reward. You get this little burst orgasm. I mean, I think probably most men feel like kind of stupid afterward, but you get this little like, oh, a happy thing. And people, men in their teenage years and in their 20s will all do this. And she points out that what you're learning there is to get a physiological reward for inequality, because she is sure what is happening on the screen is an objectification of women, et cetera. And the entire atmosphere of a pornified society, she thinks, has constituted this distorted view of the way women look at themselves, of the way men look at women in these massively awful power dynamics, which leads us all quite sick. I mean, people are now seeing, obviously, you brought up Kareem, all the studies have been brought up of sexual intercourse between boys and girls or teenagers or 20s is like really low, and the men don't know what they're doing, the women don't know what they're doing. So to your point, and Radhika Desai actually brought this up, is the book that Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism. I think it was called like Women Have Better Sex Under Communism or something. And I think like the title is so good, which is why the book did so well, but almost the entire thesis is that like, we know this as men, women need men to be in fairly good, I think, mental health to have good sex. I'm just putting that out there. And a woman needs a man to be performing in a certain way to have good sex. And under socialism, if things are certain sort of stresses are taken care of economically, the women just have better sex. It's almost like a funny basic argument, but it also goes to this idea of in capitalism, and this back to this conception of capitalism as freedom, and that's what the West can offer. Is the point of capitalism is to commodify everything, right? And including turn your body and yourself into a commodity, which is literally objectification of the self, which is putting a woman on the shelf on OnlyFans or whatever else it is. And that is that is something that, again, for better or worse, as alternative visions of how to arrange society and how to talk about women and everything else, Islam and Islamism had an alternative answer. Love it or hate it, I have a ton of sympathy and empathy for them trying something different. Communism tried something different, although it's been, since the Cold War, erased. And I think it would be a massive tragedy for the world. This is to your point, to completely bulldoze the world with just a capitalist vision of freedom that only leaves room for just pure commodification. And eventually we will have to revolt against that. And so to underline it, I'm no fan of the way, to answer the question that I put on the table there with pornography of like, okay, let's put women in bags. No, okay, that's wrong too, or whatever. We could do better. But, the hubris of saying, well, the capitalist vision of the way we treat women and the way they should treat themselves is correct or right, or the only option is bullshit, unimaginative, immoral bullshit. So good on the Islamic Republic for saying, fuck that. Do you okay, women, you want to show your hair or do you want to be porn stars? Like, yeah.
And the question of safety, I think, is also a very important one. I talk to many women in the West who come to, for example, over here in China, but also in Iran and other parts of the Muslim world, and say they feel very safe when they walk on the streets, and also in the evening, and in the night. And there is something in our cities in the West where you just shouldn't go on the streets after 10 o'clock or when it's dark as a woman, or at least you need to be with in a group. These are all very difficult questions. Like, why do women feel so unsafe in our Western cities? Well, one example is, in my opinion, in capitalist societies that are very rooted in that kind of individualism and the commodification of human being and sexuality that creates really, really sexually aggressive people on the streets. You know, especially in moments like the evening or drinking, you know, alcohol and that kind of stuff. And I think these are all, very difficult moral questions. Like, where is the weight? Where do we put the weight when it comes to human rights, whether it's women's rights or minority rights, etc., etc. But what it always comes down to, in my opinion, is that we don't have any leg to stand on as Westerners by saying, oh, these people need to do that or these people need to do that. Because we're such a failing society in that sense. And when you talk about that commodification of human life and how capitalism eventually does that to human beings, you should read one of my papers on the psychology of capitalism. It's an academic paper. You'll like it. It created quite a stir in the field. I'll send it to you. And
I would love to.
I'm serious. The end point of capitalism, the end point, the peak of capitalism, is the Epstein class. That's it. That's the end point, guys. That's where you go. You work hard. So capitalism, make more money, make more profit, expand. That's colonialism as well. Expand. Entrepreneurial self, get more and better and everything, and eventually you have your islands and you own people, and at the top, at the peak, there's nothing more, and the only thing that is left is depravity, pure depravity. Epstein, Gulf states, kings and queens style.
And I want to
ultimate.
Can depravity. I add something to that's on this point with women too? Is that I don't know if people have talked about it openly because it seems so taboo. Is, I broke this thing down with Steven Pinker writing a letter for Alan Dershowitz on behalf. He claims he didn't know, but defending Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know if you've seen it. He wrote this letter. It came out a while ago, but I don't know if that's too loud. Should I wait for that to end? I just got like Do you hear that?
Oh yeah, I can hear that.
I don't think it'll last very long, but that's probably too much. This can't last long.
It's kind of manageable now. Like I barely hear it now.
Really?
And now it's doable.
Maybe it has
doable.
A noise reducer. Okay, they stopped. So yeah, people should watch that one. But Steven Pinker wrote a letter for Alan Dershowitz that Alan Dershowitz asked him to give his linguistic expertise on a law, on a passage about using the mail or whatever for sex trafficking. And he wrote it for him, and I broke it down, and people should watch it. But it was so infuriating because to your point about capitalism and commodification, like there's been a lot of dispute about how old the girls on the island are, and everyone's trying to focus on pedophilia and whatnot. But when we take this kind of, which is there, and we should, okay, great. But when we step back to the way you just perfectly put it about capitalism and this depravity and that we're talking about pornification societies, I think it's so underrated that what was also clearly happening was luring girls in, whether you had to say it or not, young girls, but maybe they were over 18, with the promise of being models. Like you're best friends with Les Wexner, and he owns Abercrombie and Fitch and Victoria's Secret, which became a dream for a lot of little girls in America to be a Victoria's Secret angel or whatever. And why I'm bringing up the Pinker thing that's so infuriating is the law that he does this, I think, disingenuous linguistic work in order to try to basically make it apply to nobody. And it may have been the thing that helped Epstein not be convicted of this. And people should go back and read this letter that he wrote. The statute was written in such a way that they were trying to cast a wide net because people were like, sex trafficking is terrible. How do we write a law so if anyone gets even close to the crime, it will apply and they will go to jail for at least 10 years. That's how it was written, up to life. And it writes these words in if you're using the mail and it uses three things like persuade, entice, or there's three other words or whatever, someone to have illegal sex with you, you're whatever. And Pinker does this whole kind of thing that basically disappears the law. And it was so infuriating to me because that word, especially entice, is a good one for capitalism because that gets to the point of like, if somebody sends you a wink wink emoji being like, hey, want to come party at my island, just going to be some interesting people there. And those interesting people is the founder of Victoria's Secret who's funding the private plane who's going to pick you up or whatever, and you know you're a 19-year-old girl, and you know these men are doing, you know, like it's enticing. It's enticing you. And then you get to the island and they're like, hey, massage, hey, a little bit more, a little bit more. And pretty soon you're doing this. And pretty soon you're there. And that's the way that so many women I know who have been abused, which is so many. I'm sure the men are like, just talk to the women in your lives. And they all have these stories, suffer through such shame and self-blame and hate because they're like, I put myself there. I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have done it. And it's so insidious. And it's the exact thing you were underlining with capitalism and commodification of that enticement that capitalism can make a prostitute out of anyone, right? That's a particular story about women and powerful men. But there's version, which is really, really violent and insidious. There's versions of that for men who, you know, maybe go take a job for some kind of slimy tech company or a big tobacco company or whatever, just for the paycheck. And you feel like a little bit of a sellout. That's what capitalism does to everyone. And it's incredibly violent to women and young women who I guarantee you were having visions and dreams of becoming the next Victoria's Secret model, you know, and taking care of their family in Florida or whatever, which never comes along. You just have to blow one more former president or whatever, and you might get that contract. And pretty soon you're blaming yourself. And that's why women stay silent. And yeah, sickening shit.
And now we know that all these organizations were set up, or all, I should not generalize, but many of these organizations were just set up by a bunch of pedos with the whole idea of, okay, then we have easy meat. And you also saw it with where it all comes out now that they are opening their own adoption centers and privatized internment schools and all that stuff where they can just freely get vulnerable kids to abuse. And, you know, talking about that whole commodification of human life, I mean, you must have seen that email or that information that comes from the Epstein files, that one of those bosses of the very famous modeling agency sends 3 12-year-old triplets to Epstein on his birthday on a private plane. Just human beings, little human beings, just being shipped to him for his birthday to play around with. It's I mean, what is running our societies, the things that the people that run our so-called democracies, is so incredibly depraved that it really, I must say, it really, what's the English word? I feel, I don't know the word, but you'll get when I explain it. I feel a lot of forgiveness to those people who had all these Pizzagate conspiracies before. I mean, this stuff is at least as bad.
Yeah. And the Pizzagate stuff was a stand-in for all of this stuff. But I guess there was anyway, I won't go down the Pizzagate thing, but something weird was happening around Cosmo Pizza, whatever it was. And I'm not, like, at this point, everyone has made the joke that Eyes Wide Shut is a documentary. And so, you know, I'm not going to discount anything at this point. Yeah. You're muted, Peter.
Peter, you're muted.
Oh, I see this thing. We're way over time, but I just wanted to end off with if you have pro-capitalists in your life, I found that a very effective entry point to critiquing the system that they love so much is precisely sex work, because then you get to tap into their, you know, like the brainstem where a lot of their people's thinking about sex is involved. And whereas they don't seem to have any problem with exploitation in any other realm, you know, somebody working in a coal mine and dying from black lung doesn't seem to bother them that much because it's a free choice, it's a free contract. But then you start talking about sex work and all of a sudden worries about exploitation come to the fore. And I find that that's a very, it can be a very effective way to get them to expand that thinking to everywhere else where there is exploitation, but they normally just don't think about it because genitals aren't involved. It's also really
Yeah.
interesting. I generally don't agree. I don't really know Dworkin's writing, but I very much don't agree with Chris Hedges' view on pornography. When I read what he writes about it, I'm like, what porn are you watching, dude? Like, you have to delve into
Yeah.
sexology studies. Like, human sexuality is so ridiculously diverse that anytime anyone says something like a blanket statement about pornography, I'm like, okay, you really need to delve into the research on that. Like, whatever kind of pornography you're talking about is a drop in the bucket in the total realm of diversity. But leaving all of that
I find him
aside,
convincing often. I find him quite convincing when he writes
in
about
some
it.
things, definitely, but where his religious beliefs get in the way of or direct his thinking, like on pornography and also on socialism. He said recently that he doesn't think socialism would work because of human nature. Human nature is fallen,
Yeah, yeah,
coming from Christianity.
I agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
That was also something I really could not agree with.
But nonetheless, my point is just like, we're wrapping up at the end. But if listeners have friends that are very pro capitalist, um, I think the whole sex work conversation can be a good way of getting them to grasp that exploitation does not only happen when genitalia is involved. In fact, it happens in all sorts of realms. And if you can get them to apply that same kind of moral sense that is aroused whenever they're thinking about sex work, and apply it to other areas of the economy where there's just as much lack of free choice, lack of free will, so much the same exact compulsion, you might find it an effective way to try to get them to think more deeply about these sorts of things. But just an idea. Oh, also
Yeah.
one last point I find interesting, like with Hedges and people of that view. I don't know how Dworkin deals with this, but one dead giveaway that there's a serious rational flaw in their thinking is that so many of these people only focus on women. It's like, well, humanity includes men as well, and pornography and sex work also includes a lot of men. Estimates I remember, I'm probably, I wouldn't trust my memory, but I think like somewhere like 10-20% of sex workers are men for male clients. And it's so interesting to me that so many of the people that are so exercised about sex work seem to only focus on women sex workers and not male sex workers. And I think that there's a very clear kind of psychological reason for that. But leaving that all aside, that's like
And it's
another
one of the only
hour-long
professions.
conversation.
And it's one of the only professions in the world where the man earns less than the woman in the porn industry.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's the capitalist argument in favor of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
finally some gender equality.
men are of lower value, lower commodity. Yeah.
Commodity
Okay.
and human beings.
Man, this has been almost a 2 hour talk, but I think we could even we could make it a 4 or 5 hour talk.
We didn't even get to the Jews and the Jewish question. If anyone made it this far,
Yeah. So
follow
we need
me.
to do that.
I'll just tell that I have been asking a question that I think is on a lot of people's minds, which relates to my fear of what might happen on the right. But it's just simple of why are there so many Jews in the Epstein files? And I asked it to Elon Pape. I asked it to Radhika Desai. I have Miko Peled coming up on my show. I think we're going to get into it there. Peter Beinart is coming back on my show. And it's like, it's time to talk about these things, mostly because if people are watching the crash out of someone like Nick Fuentes or whatever, who are done, they're done with this version of Trumpism and everything that we said at the beginning of the conversation about the difference of the left and the right and interventionism or whatever. What they want is to end foreign wars, but not for the reasons that you and I do. They want to come home and be isolationist, and they don't understand how the capitalist empire has thrived on foreign wars and all the exploitation that you and I would argue for them. And so when the economy crashes, they're in for a big surprise. And whatever comes next after Trump, I think is going to take on a much more aggressive flavor. And I'm seeing the comments that are starting to drift from sort of just, anti-Zionism to just full on like Hitler should have finished the job stuff.
Yeah.
And I
I've
get
noticed
the
that too.
frustration. I totally get the frustration because no one's talking about this. People are Googling CEOs' names. Like, they're not fucking stupid. They can look Howard Lutnick up and be like, okay, him too. Like, they can see this stuff, and we have to talk about it. And just as a caveat, I know we're out of time, but there are historical, social reasons for this high proportionality of Jews in the Epstein files. But there are also theological reasons that I think we also have to talk about. And we have to have these conversations carefully and responsibly, but ignoring it is a disaster. Ignoring it is going to be putting everyone in peril.
Just Occam's razoring it. He was a Jewish supremacist, so wouldn't he just choose to associate with more Jewish people, and then the non-Jewish people he would associate with was probably, you know, for his job as a spy. And he's like, shit, I've got to hang out with these inferior people. You know, I don't know. That's my Occam's razor, kind of the simplest explanation. Like,
he's Jewish, and so people, you know, hang out with people who look and sound like them at the cafeteria in school, and there's some of that of just like, well, of course that's going to be his inner social circle, but there's a higher concentration of Jews in academia and banking and, you know, all kinds of industries that have historical, mostly Ashkenazi Jews, but that have historical reasons. But people are bringing up things like the Talmud and all kinds of things that we do need to talk about. And so, I don't know if we want to open up that entire can of worms here since we're out of time.
Yeah. So can we keep this for another time, Jay?
Yeah.
I think that would be super interesting because I think this is worth a show, to be very honest. And
no, totally.
And I wanted to say that I find it really good that you do that. I find it very courageous. And people might say, "Oh, why is it?" No. This is serious courageous. If you really want to go deeper into that question, that is a big taboo in many ways. And you, of course, as a Jewish man yourself, for you that is a better, or how can I say that? It's easier as an Ashkenazi Jew yourself to enter that terrain.
I have a little privilege to do this. So I'm going to use it. Yeah.
But I would, we would.
We'll do it on another show. But when Peter said, well, he's a Jewish supremacist, the big question there is, well, is Judaism inherently supremacy? Is it a supremacy ideology? And that's the big question that needs to be carefully, historically parsed. But I'm not going to shy away from it. I made my little public intellectual career with Sam Harris, although I hate where he's gone with it, by doing the same thing with Islam, being like, you know, are people not going to ask, why are there so many Muslim hijackers on the plane? Well, okay, like there's reasons for that too we have to talk about, but pretending they're not saying Allahu Akbar and reading the Quran is not going to help Joe Schmo in Idaho not beat up his Muslim neighbor. And so that's like what I'm worried about now.
That's such a good point, man. That's such a good point. Yes, because that was the safe religion. Eh? We can ask any question we want and discuss any depravity we can apply when it comes to Islam and Muslims and this and that, and maybe even Christianity. But you're actually that's why I say it's courageous, because you're going into the same kind of questions, similar questions, but for a religion where you cannot do that.
Yeah, exactly. The taboo has to be lifted. Judaism should be criticized like all the others, and there's legit criticisms of it. If people want a preview of it, you could just like ask an AI these days, what are the most controversial passages in the Talmud? And it'll give you a list, and you can link to them and read the full passages. But it's a bunch of old stuff from 1,500 years ago that's totally fucking crazy about marrying virgins and how much they cost. And like, there's crazy shit in there that there are Jews who follow. There really are people who live by that book. I don't know if Epstein was one of them or not, but it's not commanding them to be pedophiles. I'll just sort of like get that out of the way, but we could save that for another, So it's
sounds good.
We'll tackle that
good.
treasure chest.
We're gonna get you on within the next couple of weeks, Jay, and then we're gonna talk that talk.
Yeah, good
well,
talking
this is
to
fun.
you. And
I love talking to you guys. Yeah, we could do this all day.
Great.
Let's hope the world sort of, I don't know,
and
stays a little
enjoy
sane
Berlin
for us.
while you're there. It's a pretty cool city, despite the cringe-worthiness of some German people. There's some cool Germans as well.
Yes. So all my neighbors and now neighbors, let's thumbs up. No, it's great. It's a great city. I love it. Yeah.
Great, man. Absolutely excellent.
Cool.
We're gonna do that again soon. Thanks for coming on, and keep
Anytime.
fighting the good fight, Jay.
Indeed.
Yeah, you guys too.
All
All
right.
right. See you. Till next time.
Bye.
Static crackles, voices rise. Truth breaks through their velvet lies. A screen of fire, a shield of steel. BettBeat media makes you feel no borders, no change, no silence.